obviously you have the front head like what we were talking about. The front head traditionally, most of the time, usually 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a coated head. What that is a standard, nowadays it's a standard polymer head, and then they actually spray a coating on it, which is also polymer, so it gives it kind of this rough texture. I don't know if you guys want to feel that. You probably felt a snare drum before, but it has kind of a rough texture on it. But that gives you, if you ever want to use brushes for jazz type stuff, it actually gives you a certain sound with that. But also having that coating on there, since it's all over the entire drum, it changes the tonal resonance of it and the kind of sound when you actually play it. That's the same thing with tom heads, everything like that, whether you want clear ones, like the clear one on the bottom here. It will always change your sound. The snare drum, the one thing that they do that's very different comparatively to most drums as far as how modern drum heads that they put on nowadays. So on snare drums, they use really, really thin heads. I'll grab a really thin head, standard head and a thin head. Standard head that would be on the bottom of most toms that you play, even on some kick drums. It's very similar. It's a single ply head. What that means is that it's only one piece of plastic that they've actually used to make this entire head. As you hear, it actually has a little bit of tension to it. It's a fairly thick head as far as the amount of millimeters. You can kind of feel how thick that is. And then this is what they put on the bottom of the snare. It's like paper thin. In here, it's very, very thin. The reason why they put this on the bottom of the snare, since the snares, they call this the snare bed. The snares themselves, that's what they're actually needing. They're on this. And since it's thinner, it's actually going to move more or react more to air. What that does is that gives you a little bit better dynamic. It gives you a little better dynamic when you're playing. So whether you're playing really, really light or really, really hard, it gives you a different tone and it will always react to how you're playing. In the 80s, a lot of metal drummers would put these on there because they'd be playing so hard that they didn't want, if they accidentally bounced or something like that with their snare drum, they didn't want it to register as much. They only wanted the really hard hits to really register and give you the sound that they were looking for. So they would use a little thicker heads like this. So that's kind of two ways that you can get different sounds out of just the bottom head from the snare drum. Then tuning them together also, that's really a thing of preference, and that's why you can get so many different tones from the snare drum. Is some people will tune it kind of like Ringo Starr, Beatles kind of sounding snare drum. You can tune it actually a little bit higher on the top, but then on the bottom of the snare head, it would actually be extremely loose. So you get kind of that kind of almost really like a kind of dead tone out of it. And then his snares would actually be tuned fairly loose. With the snares themselves, that's actually another means of adjusting it and getting kind of the sound and the playability that you're looking for. No matter what, everyone has a preference of tension, but one of the means of actually adjusting the bottom snares to get the sound that you want is getting it right so that you have more of a round sound of it. You always want this snare to be perfectly centered. So you want there to be the same amount of space on this side and the same amount of space on this side when you have it at the tension that you desire. So when I loosen it, you see that it kind of, this is the actual throw off, or the side that actually makes it, the mechanism makes it so you can actually loosen it and tighten it. When I turn that off, it gave you a little extra space on this side. So when you tighten it, it's going to bring it up so that it has an equal amount of tension, or it has an equal amount of space on both sides of the head. So with that, you'll find kind of the tension that you like. Then you'll go in there and you'll put it on there. So a lot of times it's just trial and error of putting it on. You know, because it actually stretches a little bit when you do that. So when you have it on here, it's only a certain amount of distance on this side, and then it might be more distance here than when tighten it, it actually gets so it's an equal distance when it's at the tension that you like. So a lot of it's just kind of moving it back and forth and tightening it and loosening it and tightening it and loosening it until it's perfectly centered at the exact sound tension that you want. Because if you choose, that's kind of the standard middle of the row tension. If you tighten it up a lot, the snares actually will change the tone of the snare drum. Or I can loosen it a ton, and that'll give you a lot of different sounds. Change. So you can actually change the tone a lot. So there's certain tension that you'll find that you like. And as I said before, it's just getting it centered at that exact tension, and then that's going to be, for the most part, always where you like it, or within reason where you like it, where you can find adjusted here. On the some vintage style ones will actually use these little chords on here to get the tension of that straight. What I mean by that is obviously there's 2 points right here on either side, or 4 points where the snares actually mount. If you go like this, you can feel that the tension on that side and on this side is equal. Sometimes if it's pulled a little more to one side, it'll be really tight on one side and really loose on the other. You want it to be equal, otherwise if one side is looser than the other, when you hit it, it gets this like zzz kind of thing, and it'll actually buzz because those sides are looser than the other, as opposed to if they're all equal, they'll all equally kind of choke the bottom snare drum, or actually make it so that the head kind of gets you that standard kind of tone, and it won't ring out a lot where it'll make it so it'll buzz. Yet again, like I said with all the other drums, it's all preference of how you want it to. Does anybody have any questions? What was that? A lot of vintage style ones will have that, and then a lot more modern drums like this one. This one uses these plastic cords here, which are kind of just like little. Oh, you wonder what material it is?
No.
Pretty much all snare drums have that. Otherwise, they're just kind of a thin tom. So that's really what discerns it from the other drums, is having this snare drum. And that's what gives you this sound up, as opposed to the, that type of sound. So if you heard that sound at all, he has a snare drum. But as far as, modern ones, they'll have this piece on there. That's what I thought you were referring to hold on the snare. And then, which these are preferred, because these ones, the ones with the string, they do take a lot of time to adjust and to get adjusted just right. These ones you can kind of just pull on them, make sure they look straight, and they're straight from there. And these also stretch out a lot, and they break fairly often. So, like I have an old vintage snare drum that I use, and I have an entire bag of these extra cords inside of my case for that snare drum, because I'll be at a gig and I'll be playing and it breaks in the middle of the set, and I have to have an extra one right